This is Jarrod Horak, and this is my latest Road to the 2023 Kentucky Derby points race recap video. In this video, I'm going to recap the Arkansas Derby and the Florida Derby, and they were both run on April 1st. I have one more recap video to go in this series. I've covered all of these Kentucky Derby points races from the first one, and I'm going to go all the way through the last one and recap all of those. And I have analysis videos for all of those races as well. And the final four Kentucky Derby points races in my final video that I'll recap, the Wood Memorial, the Bluegrass, and the Santa Anita Derby will be run on April 8th, and then the Lexington Stakes on April 15th, the final Kentucky Derby points race. So check my YouTube channel out for all of these Oaks and Derby points race recap videos. Now, if you're interested in my annual Kentucky Derby Day full card at Churchill Downs, that product will be available later this spring at therunawayrhorse.com on my sales page. I'm going to have Kentucky Derby, Preakness, Belmont Stakes Day full cards. I'm going to do the Kentucky Oaks Day stakes races, the Black-Eyed Susan Day stakes races at Pimlico. And you can purchase the entire Triple Crown product, all those products. So go over to therunawayrhorse.com on my sales page for more details on my Triple Crown series products that I'm covering this year. And now we're going to recap the two big races from April 1st. And your 2-year-old champion Forte was the heavy favorite in the Grade 1 Florida Derby at 1 1/8 at Gulfstream Park on April 1st. And it looked like, just looking at the speed ratings and how the race would play out, that Forte was probably going to have an easy time in this race. But it wasn't easy, but he did get the job done. Now, Fort Bragg, he was one that I picked on top in the Sunland Derby just because I thought he might set that right tactical type trip in that race. They ended up scratching in that race. They thought there was too much speed, and they ended up shipping to run here, and they set the pace in this race. Fort Bragg, actually, he broke a little bit slow, and I think that helped his chances because he was out in post 10, and that little bit of a slow break enabled him to move over a bit and not lose as much ground. And when he just had that just a stutter step start, he was able to get towards the inside, and he was able to get up there and set the pace. And Joel Rosario was riding, and he was clear early, and he stayed clear for a while. Mr. Peaks and Mr. Ripple were ending up chasing him. Now, Forte in the early stages, he was back in 9th place. He was out in post 11. He was racing wide, and he was well off the pace. Your second betting choice in this race was Mage. He was only making his 3rd lifetime start, and he broke slow. He was last of 12 in the early going here. Now, as I said, Fort Bragg had the lead for quite some time. You saw other horses like Cyclone Mischief for trainer Dale Romans. He was in a decent wide stalking position. And then Forte and Mage, they started to advance. Fort Bragg was starting to weaken. And then Mage made the big first run. He made a wide move, and he was able to get to the front. And it looked like under Luis Saez that he might win this race and turn the tables on Forte, because he ran against him in the Fountain of Youth Stakes, and he ended up finishing 4th with a wide trip. But Mage, after having that stakes experience under his belt, ran a much better race here, and he tried to pull off the upset, but Forte was just too much in the late going. He was able to gather enough momentum, get past Mage, and win by a length. So it was a good, solid effort from the top 2 finishers there. Now, Cyclone Mischief, as I said, with that wide stalking trip, he ended up just finishing best of the rest in 3rd. He was in the Fountain of Youth Stakes as well, and he set the pace that day, and he finished 3rd. And in this race, he stuck the pace, and he finished 3rd. So Cyclone Mischief for trainer Dale Romans has enough points to make the Kentucky Derby, along with Forte and Mage. And Fort Bragg ended up weakening to finish 5th after setting those fractions in this race. Now, the biggest disappointment in this race out from post 12 was W. Nell. This one last year won the Remsen Stakes, but just hasn't been able to do any damage in the Kentucky Derby points races this year. So the final time was solid enough, 148 and change. Forte is now 4 for 4 in graded dirt route races. He certainly deserves to be the favorite in the Kentucky Derby. He hasn't really been running much faster than his rivals, though. This crop seems to be fairly evenly matched. But Forte, with 4 Grade 1 wins now in his career, 4 for 4 around 2 turns, he's one that certainly is going to be a solid contender in the Kentucky Derby. He just loves to win races. He's got a lot of class. He's going to come into the Kentucky Derby on a nice winning streak, and he just looks like a solid trifecta contender in the Kentucky Derby. Now, Mage is one that still should have more upside, and his best races should be in front of him. As I said, he's only run 3 times. He was fast in his debut in a slow early, fast late event. He needed that Fountain of Youth for stakes experience, and then he moved forward nicely in this race. But he did make some mistakes, like that slow start, and I just don't know that he has enough experience to win the Kentucky Derby, where Forte has plenty of seasoning and experience. And Cycling Mischief is another one, has enough experience. He's got early pressing versatility. He tries hard for Dale Romans, and he's found some consistency after back-to-back good efforts in the graded stakes ranks against Forte. So that's my look at the Florida Derby, and now we're going to look at the Arkansas Derby. And we had a flashier winner in this race. Also on April 1st at Oaklawn Park at 1 1/8. At the pace of this race, 2 Eagles River, he was able to get out there and set the pace. I didn't know that he was going to be able to get loose like that, but he was able to jump up there and get loose. Now, Harlow Cap figured to be part of the pace, and he was up there as well, but he couldn't keep up with 2 Eagles River early. Airtime was up there as well, and then Reincarnate, the horse that I liked in this race, after that Rebel Stakes in the slop, where he typically, when he was running in Southern California, he was showing early pressing speed and running well in all of his races. But in the Rebel Stakes, he rallied from much further back. He was back in 9th place, and he was able to finish nicely. He had traffic troubles. He had the slop, a lot of dirt kicked in his face. He had a bad trip that day, but he was able to finish a good third. And then coming off of that race, you just knew that he was going to be looking for a better start in here, and he did get that better start. Reincarnate was chasing from second. So 2 Eagles River was in front. Reincarnate was chasing from second. Harlow Cap and Airtime were behind them. And then Angel of Empire was back in 7th place, but he was never too far back under Flavien Prat. He was always within hailing distance, and he got a great trip, actually. If you watch the replay, he's just back there all by himself in 7th. Nobody around him. He's outside, and he's just loving life, just cantering along behind the pace. And the pace wasn't super quick, but they were, it was fairly contested with 2 Eagles River out in front, and then some quality horses behind him, like Reincarnate to his outside. And it looked like Reincarnate was going to be able to go by 2 Eagles River and possibly get the first run, but he never really quickened. He was eventually able to get past that one, but it was Angel of Empire with a wide move. He just made a wide, quick move, took the lead, and the race was over quickly in the stretch. He won by more than 4 lengths, so that was a nice effort. Now, behind him, it was a real scramble. 5 horses were battling for the minor positions, and King Russell was the longest shot on the board. He was a 58-1 last out maiden winner for trainer Ron Moquette, and Rafael Bejarano was aboard, and he had the closing momentum on the outside, and he was able to just get second. And then Reincarnate did hold off Rocket Ken for the 3rd spot. Now, Rocket Ken was coming out of the Fountain of Youth Stakes in Florida. He had won the Holy Bull Stakes. It wasn't a fast renewal of the Holy Bull. And then last time, Forte defeated him in the Fountain of Youth Stakes. And then Rocket Ken came in here. He was bet down. He was the favorite. And he was outfinished by Reincarnate for the show. So he finished 4th. And then Airtime was just behind them. And Red Route 1 ended up finishing 6th. And he didn't get any Kentucky Derby points, and he needed them. And he did not get them in this spot. And then 2 Eagles River weakened to finish 7th. And then we also had Interlock Empire, Harlow Cap, and Bourbon Bash running in this race as well. Final time, decent enough, 149.68. But Angel of Empire was really the only one that handled the distance, is what it looked like. It looked like with that blanket finish behind him, that Angel of Empire already proven at the 1 1/8 distance when he won the Grade 2 Risen Star Stakes. He came right back and he won again at a 1 1/8. So when you get to these longer races, like you go from a 1/16 to a 1 1/8, and then a 1 1/8 to a 1 1/4, you start to get some separation. Some of the horses just can't handle the step up in distance, and that seemed to be the case here, where Angel of Empire handled the 1 1/8. The others really didn't, and that doesn't bode well for their chances at a 1 1/4, but it does for Angel of Empire, because obviously he's coming into the Kentucky Derby in really good form, and he has a good finishing kick. But I do question the fields that he's been beating, especially in this race when it comes to distance prowess. I'm just not sure that these other horses really want to go that far. Now, King Russell did well enough to finish 2nd, but how strong was the race when you had a 58-1 last out maiden winner running second. Now, Reincarnate, I thought he was solid in California. Hasn't been as good. He just always finishes in the top 3 and he tries hard. But maybe he's just not the same out of California. Maybe he's just not a mile and an eighth horse. So he doesn't want to go this far. Maybe that's more of it than anything else. But he'll give a good account of himself all the time. He's just seems to be a cup below. I thought he might be a little better than he's proven to be. But he's an okay horse, and he has enough points to run in the Kentucky Derby. Getting that third place spot over Rocket Ken, who also has enough Derby points, was big for him because that does qualify him for the Kentucky Derby. King Russell can be there as well. Picking up 40 points, we'll have to see if he does qualify, because right now there's still some Derby points races to be run, and the cutoff could be up to 45 points. We'll have to see how all that goes. But overall, out of the horses in this race, Angel of Empire would be the only one that I would consider a solid Derby contender at this point. And from the Florida Derby, again, the winner, Forte, I think from a win standpoint could be a Kentucky Derby threat. I just don't know that Mage, unraced 2-year-old, can win a race like the Kentucky Derby. But it was a solid effort. And then Cyclone Mischief, don't know if he can win, but I wouldn't completely discount him from finishing somewhere in the Superfecta in the Kentucky Derby. We'll have to see how all that plays out after post positions and we see the final composition of the field. But Forte and Angel of Empire, they both ran solid races, and they're solid contenders for the Kentucky Derby on the first Saturday in May. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment if you like this content. And again, that wraps up this video. I'm going to have some more Kentucky Oaks and Kentucky Derby points race recap videos, and then some other Oaks and Derby related videos as we go all the way up to the Kentucky Derby on the first Saturday in May. So keep checking out my YouTube channel each week for more videos. And until I see you next time, good luck at the races.